In episode 3 of the Skirmish Wargames hobby vlog, we check out a $28 haul of Marauder-Era vintage minis for Warhammer Fantasy Battle. Hi folks, this is Lee from skirmishwargames.com. I'm here with Lynn.
Hello everyone.
And we'd like to welcome you to episode 3 of our vlog series where we talk about miscellaneous topics relating to tabletop wargaming that may not warrant a full cinematic video like we might do for a full battle report, but should be interesting nonetheless. At least we hope so. So today's topic is this batch of old Warhammer Fantasy Battle miniatures. If you remember our last vlog, episode 2, we delved into a $19 batch of old Warhammer 40k miniatures, including some guys that went back to the Rogue Trader era from 1988, 1989. Some of these here in this Warhammer Fantasy Battle batch, I think this cost us $28, so a little bit more, which means we might need to find a few more treasures to make it worthwhile. But some of these guys in here look like they're old Marauder miniatures, so that would put them kind of in that 1988 through 1993-94 time frame, give or take. So I guess the value of this particular batch would depend on how much you like older miniatures. If you're really more into the new Age of Sigmar stuff, the plastics and all that, then this isn't going to mean anything to you at all, most likely. But this was my era. This is when I got introduced to Warhammer 40k, and I'd been playing D&D for years before that. So these old metal minis are kind of nostalgic to me, and so I'm kind of excited to see what's in here. So I guess value is in the eye of the beholder, and I kind of like this old stuff. So I think we're going to find some good things in here. And Lynn, when you looked in here, you said there was a few things you hoped to find, right?
Some dwarves.
Some dwarves. And I do believe, if we look closely, if we peer closely into the box there, that there are some old metal dwarves. So I don't know if those are GW dwarves or Marauder dwarves. We'll find out. And actually, the connection between Marauder and GW is a little bit fuzzy to me, but as I understand it, Marauder was actually formed by a couple of GW designers, and they kind of formed their own company, but it was still closely allied with Citadel, and was advertised in White Dwarf, and they made miniatures for GW games. So that's my imperfect understanding of it anyway, and if anybody out there kind of knows the full story, please leave a comment in the comment section because we'd love to hear it. But the bottom line is, Marauder miniatures and Citadel miniatures were both made for Warhammer Fantasy Battle, and I think that's mostly what we're going to find in here, along with some other stuff, like a plastic horse, and that eagle looks like he's for Lord of the Rings, and some other things. So, shall we dump this out and see what treasures are within?
Yeah, let's see what's in there.
Okay. I'm going to pull out this big eagle, because he looks like he's in pretty good shape, and we don't want him to break, those wings to break off during the dumping process. And then I will gently... These guys arrived kind of just in a plastic bag, so it's funny how you buy miniatures from online vendors sometimes. They just kind of throw them in there. Maybe let's start by separating these guys out into like groups, and then we'll look at each group individually and see what we got out of this. These guys here, these little dudes here, look like, to me, some Marauder Goblins, already primed. Dwarves, elves. So there's a very old metal orc. I tried to look at his tab on the back using a loop, and I think it says GW and then 1980 something, so I can't tell for sure, but that might be one of the earliest incarnations of a Warhammer Fantasy Battle orc. And just for fun, let me show you something. So there is that old, presumably late 1980s orc. And here is a more recent one from GW. This is a Krogskull's Boys Burnaboy from Kill Team. And then here is a plastic orc. His base underneath says 1991, so I'm not exactly sure what era he is from, but he's a plastic. And as you can see, the later orcs, much bigger than the original orcs. These guys were kind of scrawny and feral, and these ones here must have been raiding a lot of villages and eating a lot of corn because they're quite a bit bigger, but that is scale creep for you at its finest. But regardless, I still like the tiny metal orcs. I have a couple more, and so if I get motivated, maybe I'll make a squad of pygmy orcs just for the nostalgia effect. You think that's one of the ones you want to take?
It is. I think that's one of the ones I want to take, but I'm guessing you're not going to...
No, I'm not going to let you have that one. I'll let you have all the dwarves and the Skavens and stuff, but I think I want to keep that little metal orc because I have plans. All right, what else we got? We got elves, looks like here. Okay. So these elves here look like they are plastics. Bottom of the base says 1995. Of course, that doesn't mean anything. It could have been based with an older base, but those are some plastic elves. And then this guy here is a metal elf, and he's actually painted, and it's not terrible. He could be fixed up. He needs a shield, but fortunately, if you remember, we did a huge bits bag unpacking a few months ago, and so we have a ton of old GW plastic shields. So I'm sure we can find this guy a suitable shield and just kind of fix up his paint job just a little bit. He's got a few dings from being in the bag with the rest of these minis. But definitely this guy, with just a little bit of touch-up, could join some sort of a war band, even if he is the sole representative of the High Elves. So maybe he left the High Elf Sanctuary to go out and fight evil, and he's going to join up with some humans and some dwarves and some halflings and other people. Much to the dismay of his family, I'm sure. But anyway, he's pretty cool. I like him, and I'm sure we can figure out something neat to do with him. Okay, this guy here looks to be a dark elf. It looks to me like he's missing a sword or something there. And I do kind of dig this dragon skin or lizard skin cloak that he's got. So we would have to figure out if we can repair that arm. Sometimes that can be a little difficult. Maybe I can find a suitable plastic piece and then pin that in there and bring him back to former glory. So looking at the tab there, it says 1995, I think. And then his front tab says Marauder. Now I'm going to take a guess that maybe that doesn't mean the Marauder miniatures line, and maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe he is a dark elf Marauder. But again, if you know anything about this guy and what his purpose is and whether he was made by Marauder or whether he is a Marauder, let us know in the comment section, and then we can say we learned something. A nice old mini. Too bad he's missing a sword, but maybe that could be repaired. Okay, the front of this guy's tab says Swordsman. I want to say the backside of his tab looks like copyright elves, but that doesn't make any sense. There must be a date there that's just kind of a little worn and hard to read. But regardless, this is a pretty cool metal sculpt, and I only wish we had about 5 or 6 different high elves from this era to mix in with this swordsman and this spear guy here, and we could have a pretty decent vintage classic high elf warband. These 2 plastic elves are okay, but sadly they just don't have the same cool factor as their metal brethren here. So, okay, these guys are a little hard to see because they're prime black and they're not very big to begin with, but I do believe these are all Marauder, all or most Marauder metal gobos. Here might be some sort of a little shaman. He's got a staff. Here's a little goblin beating a drum. So here's some kind of an armored goblin, and I think he might need some sort of a shield at the top of his fist there, but certainly we have some extra shields. And here's another soldier goblin. This guy appears to be wearing a Viking helmet and chainmail. So really some classic metal sculpts, and maybe just a hair smaller than some of the GW plastic gobos we've been painting recently. And I will say that these old Marauder goblins seem to be a little bit better equipped. So they have metal armor and nice weapons and things like that, as opposed to little short bows and spears and such. So these are the ones you want, right? You want these?
Since you won't let me have the orc, yes, I want the goblins.
Okay. So because you can't have the orc, I got to give you 4 classic Marauder goblins?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that sounds fair. So we already previously identified 1 dark elf, but it looks like we have also in this batch a couple of cold ones. And who doesn't like a nice cold one, frankly? So this guy here appears to be missing a tail, but fortunately we found the tail in the batch, so he's ready to go. We didn't get any riders, but certainly we could violate canon and, I don't know, put some Chaos Horsemen on these guys. And I also have that Rogue Trader era Space Marine medic who's supposed to be riding a motorcycle, but we don't have the motorcycle, so maybe I could go completely bonkers and find him some rider legs and put him on a cold one. And that would be legendary. Now, you were saying that you might want to steal these lizards, too.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to take the lizards, the cold ones, too.
So because you didn't get 1 orc, you're now taking 4 vintage gobos and 2 metal cold ones.
Yes.
All right. This deal just keeps getting better and better. So before we dig into this big batch of vintage dwarves over here, let's look at a couple of miscellaneous pieces. This eagle here is fully primed and completely intact as far as I can tell. He doesn't have a flight stand, but other than that, Looks ready to go. And I'm just going to guess that this is probably from the Lord of the Rings miniatures game. If anybody out there in the hive mind knows one way or the other, please leave a comment in the comment section and refute or confirm my thoughts. But pretty nice eagle. Then we have some plastic horses, or at least most of them. The tab says 1995. These guys are missing a head and a tail. This guy is missing a tail, but we'll keep him in the bits box. And I have never really figured out how to paint horses, so I need to watch a few YouTube videos on that. Oh yeah, and there's a couple other guys in here that were kind of mixed in with the dwarves. Here is a plastic Skaven, missing an arm. And Lynn, you are actually currently in the midst of painting some current GW Skaven, correct?
Yep.
So maybe we can find this guy an arm, maybe out of the bits pile. Again, we opened up 3 or 4 big bags of Warhammer Fantasy bits about 3 months ago, I think. And so there's lots of arms and other things. And so even if we can't find a Skaven arm, he could be a mutant. And maybe he'll get a tentacle or a skeleton arm or something to finish him off. And then this guy here, who appears to be, I don't know, a wizard or a sage or something like that. He's made out of plastic. Can't tell what the date is on his base or anything. But yeah, looks like someone started the process of painting him. Didn't quite finish, and I don't know if he'll ever be finished, but here he is. All right, now let's get to the good stuff. And the more I look at this batch, the better I feel about my $28 investment, because there's some very cool Marauder minis in here, and GW minis from the same era. Gosh, I think we got about 20 minis altogether, 20 decent ones anyway. So for a $28 investment, you're looking at $1 or $2 per mini. But to go online and find one of these minis on sale for $1 or $2 would be pretty difficult. With maybe the exception of these guys, I don't know. These look to be Chaos Centaur heads. And they really should come with some sort of a centaur body. I believe it's a bull or something like that, rather than a horse.
Yeah, I think it's a bull. But if anyone knows for sure, they can sure tell us in the comments.
Yeah, that's right. If you're a current expert on Chaos Centaurs, at least the vintage ones, let us know what these guys are all about. So we have 2 heads, but no bodies, no centaur bodies, which is kind of unfortunate. So we'll have to hold on to these. Maybe we can find some sort of a reasonable facsimile to attach them to. Otherwise, they're just Chaos Dwarves buried in the ground up to their waist. Okay, so here's the vintage metal dwarves we have, and just to show you how closely aligned Marauder and GW were, these 2 here seem to have GW on their tab, and these 2 here seem to have Marauder on their tab. And really, if you mixed them all together, maybe with the exception of this guy, it'd be pretty hard to tell design-wise that these 2 guys here came from a different company. Though Marauder, I think, was folded back into GW at some point, at least the designs. Again, I'm not totally sure on that. You know, leave a comment in the comment section if you know that whole story. So this guy technically could have been maybe a Marauder sculpt, and then later became a GW sculpt, but I'm not sure about that. But anyway, for now, GW, Marauder, but they look closely enough related that you could paint them all up and put them in a squad and really not be able to tell the difference. So here's the opera singer, as we call her, a lady dwarf with a Viking helmet, and she needs a shield, but fortunately, we have some. Here's another one of those GW dwarves with an axe with runes on it. Nice metal sculpt. I like it. Here's the Marauder Dwarf. He's got a hammer with runes on it. And this guy here, this is the other Marauder Dwarf sculpt, and he looks like he's probably made out of lead. I'm going to assume that these other guys are white metal, or just don't have the same patina on them, because this guy is a little dingier and darker, and he appears to have lost his hammer at some point, and somebody's tried to make a repair there, and I think we can probably help him out with that a little bit. But still, a cool vintage dwarf, and we're going to be proud to have him as a member of our dwarf war bands. So Lynn, is it safe to assume you're going to be commandeering the dwarves as well?
Yes.
Okay, so let's just take stock of what Lee gets versus what Lynn gets. So Lynn gets all the dwarves, all the gobos, the Skaven, the cold ones, and then what does Lee get? Lee gets an orc.
And a sage.
Oh, I get the sage. Well, thanks very much.
Here, I'll take those out of the way.
Okay.
So you can have yours.
So
you get the
these.
horses.
Oh, I get the great. Sweet.
And you
Just
get all
gets
the
better and
elves.
better. I'm taking it now. I get the elves. Well, that sounds completely equitable. I'm behind this transaction 100%. Well, I guess I do have to admit that since Lynn outpaints me on figures about 10 to 1, the odds of those dwarves and those goblins getting painted is much higher if you take on that responsibility. So with that in mind, I grudgingly agree to your terms. Okay, I guess that's a wrap on episode 3 of our vlog series. Lynn, did you have fun?
I did. I found a lot of minis I'm going to pilfer.
Okay, well, pilfering is allowed in the Warhammer Fantasy Battle universe. But we have a lot of fun things coming up in future vlogs, including the spider cocoons we've been threatening to show you, and we're still working on those, and a bunch of other things that I think you're going to get a big kick out of. So stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, have some fun out there, paint some minis, play some games, and stay safe. And we will talk to you very soon. So take care.
Sayonara.
Sayonara.